Greetings. Good to have you with us on this day when Mother Nature is giving us a little rain, huh? And we're saying yay, and yet driving through it, I'm Ellen O'Shaughnessy, coordinator of the Conversations and Coffee program, and we are delighted to have with us today the artists and explorers, Helen Hoffelt, Char Norman, who come together to share with us a dynamic body of two-dimensional and three-dimensional artwork that addresses environmental issues as they relate to the indigenous communities of people that Char and Helen have been among. As I was saying, Char, you know the faces of these children? Oh, yes. We've been with them. This amazingly graced exhibit is the result of their trip to the Amazon rainforest in Ecuador, specifically Selva Vida San Fronteras, the Amazon Reserve for Peace. The exhibit is titled Tipping Point. Now, before I go on, tell us about that. How are we tipping forward?
Well, we chose the name because of the environmental issues, and we're so concerned about what's happening, and we feel we could either tip towards a better future or we're tipping towards our demise. Hopefully it goes the right way, but we don't know. But we think we're in a very, very precarious point right now.
And we saw both in Ecuador.
And you're bringing the story to us.
We're bringing the story to you.
We are so grateful. Helen, you're a photographic artist,
Yes.
and you specialize in alternative photographic processes, which we can see among and around us, huh? Your work has been exhibited extensively nationally and internationally and has appeared in various publications. You've received Master of Fine Arts from State University of New York at Buffalo, taught in New York, Montana, and Italy. Retired from Columbus College of Art and Design, and we were just talking about that. Life is even fuller and more wonderful.
Right.
And you're a professor emeritus, where you are, I know from working at CCAD, admired and loved by your students. You carry on the legacy of your father, Frank Hoffelt, who was the Dean of Illustration, as well as your sisters, your mother, who attended CCAD. So the whole family, and in 2018, we had a Conversations and Coffee with the whole Hoffelt family. It was wonderful. So each of Frank's daughters have become a working artist. Char, an accomplished fiber artist specializing in paper making and fiber sculpture. You received your Master of Fine Arts from Claremont Graduate University and a Bachelor of Art from Scripps College. You've lectured and exhibited both nationally and internationally, and you have a talk to give tonight. And you are with us today. That's wonderful. You developed and conducted workshops for all ages, worked as a consultant to area schools, community arts organizations, held the positions of Associate Provost and Dean of Faculty at the Columbus College of Art and Design. Returned to the studio as a full-time professional artist. Oh, it's so wonderful to have you both with us. And bringing us to a social consciousness of the tipping point. Take it away. Huh?
So we've known each other. Char and I have known each other for many years. And we traveled together. And we were so lucky to go to Ecuador and in 2019. And so this is what this work is about, as we said.
So we flew into Ecuador, into Quito, which is the capital of Ecuador, and we then traveled deep into the Amazon rainforest. And it was really a tributary of the Amazon where we went to the reserve. And let's see, it's the world's largest river, covers almost 40% of the South American continent, so it's huge. And it was just so impressive to see this, 4,000 miles of river. The reserve, well, there's the river.
There's
there.
the river.
Okay, there's the reserve where we stayed. And this is owned by a woman who is really in contact with the indigenous people. She really supports them through clinics and providing food and water sources for them. And she fights the illegal oil drilling that's going on there and the mining. So these are photos of children in these wastewaters that are polluted from all this production that's going on in the Amazon. So if you can imagine these little kids, their water is polluted. They can't even drink it or bathe in it, but here they are.
So from the reserve, we traveled by canoe to visit the Kofan, an indigenous community.
We had a lot of adventures along the way.
Tree just fell on across the river, and we're clearing it so we can slide by underneath. Oh, it's the Amazon limbo.
So the Amazon rainforest is home to 40,000 plant species, 1,300 bird species, 3,000 types of fish, 2.5 million insects, and 430 species of mammals. So it's so diverse. This is the cacao tree, and it's native to the Amazon rainforest basin. And this is one of the major exports. It's where we get our chocolate, but it's also one that's being destroyed by the Amazon rainforest being destroyed. So imagine life without chocolate. I mean, that's pretty important.
These are photographs of diseased cacao.
Yeah. So there's a lot of logging going on in the Amazon. This is mahogany that's being taken out and sold. It's extremely expensive, but again, they're removing this from the forest. And it's, as I said, very valuable. This is the spirit tree, and it's a kapok tree. They're absolutely enormous, but they're very spiritual. The shaman here is a Rulio, and he gets lots of answers from this tree. And so, as you can see, here's our group. We were trying to surround the tree, but we could only get one side of it because it's so large. They also serve as boundaries because of the size.
What is the group?
That's, this is a group of women that we all went together, and pick up one of these because we're going again. And it was the Amazon Enrichment Tour that we took. So it was a group of friends mostly.
Right. The other thing is the Reserve for Peace brings doctors to the Amazon, to the reserve, and they have a little clinic, and so they treat the indigenous community there.
And then meeting with those indigenous people, we didn't talk a lot about that, but they were our guides, and they led us through the forest to this tree, and gave us some time there to really kind of meditate and just be with the tree.
So while I was there, I photographed the oil refineries, deforestation, and power lines while traveling through the Andes. I also was asked to photograph the reserve and the children that came to the clinic on the reserve. I saw firsthand the fragile environment of the Amazon rainforest and wanted to make images that spoke about that, and followed up with research when I returned. So in 1964, oil drilling operations began to take place in previously roadless areas by Texaco. Between the years 1964 and 1992, the Texaco Corporation and years later, Petroequator carried out intensive oil operations, and they're still doing that, by the way, in northeastern region of the Ecuadorian Amazon. The extraction of oil is responsible for the deforestation, degradation, and environmental devastation of lands across the globe. The oil extraction process results in the release of toxic drilling byproducts into local rivers, while broken pipelines and leakage result in the persistent oil spillage. In making these images, I merged the industry pictures with the images of the indigenous children. So currently, Ecuador is trapped in a cycle of debt and dependency from years of corruption that has squandered billions of dollars in high-interest loans to China. The country is reeling from years of corruption and graft. So far, 317 former government officials have been implicated in scandal. So this is invasive. It's estimated that approximately 59% of the primary rainforest has been destroyed during the last 30 years. Indigenous mortality rates in the Amazon coincide with the oil extraction and deforestation, both in time and percentage of loss. The process of these leaves is chlorophyll printing. Chlorophyll printing is an alternative photographic process where the photographic images are developed on natural leaves through the action of photosynthesis. This organic technique does not use chemicals since the photographs are exposed directly to the sun on plants or tree leaves. In parts of the rainforest, the forest is so thick that new trees grow on top of decaying trees that are called nurse trees.
So one of the really interesting things about this is that the soil in the Amazon rainforest basin is really very, very poor. You think of it as being rich, but it's not. The plants get their nutrients from these nurse trees and from fallen trees. So when we remove the trees from the Amazon, we're removing all of the nutrients as well. This is a bird called the Oran pendula, or weaver bird, and they make these nests. Go on.
I'm trying to make the sound.
Oh, is that now?
Yeah, the sound doesn't come. Okay.
At any rate, they make these nests, and they do this in colonies of maybe up to 100 of them. They hang from the trees. And being a weaver, I was absolutely fascinated by these trees. We wish we could have the call of that, but they have a really peculiar call that sounds like a drop of water. It's very loud, and you hear this, and it's like, what is that? So this is another nest, and this is the first sculpture that I did addressing the weaver birds. And I wanted to use that as a metaphor for the Ecuadorian culture. So the sculpture is in fact, it's over here. It's in the shape of a weaver bird nest, but then the bottom is open with all these colors leaking out. And those are the colors of the native dress of the indigenous people. So it's really a metaphor for the loss of culture. This is my first attempt at weaver birds, and you see them, around this wall here. I wanted to do an installation of many of them because I felt that they are very fragile. So these that I've made, the bottoms are kind of torn out. They can't hold the egg like they should. So again, it's a metaphor for the destruction of our environment. So I hope you walk through that and see all of those. This is another piece this is called Tagua. And the Tagua seed grows in a palm tree in Ecuador, and it's also known as vegetable ivory. It can be carved like ivory, it can be shaped, it can be incised, and I wanted to do sculptures addressing that. So if you take a close look at these, you'll see the seeds of the Tagua. More sculptures. Again, I wanted to address the Tagua pod in this green one, and the sculpture here on the left on the bottom is called Peg. And again, it's a very fragile structure pegged to that log as a metaphor for our loss of environment. The other one is kind of a combination of the Tagua and the weaver birds. This one, you actually see it behind us, and I hope you'll go up and take a close look at these because it's called Once There Were Trees. And that sounds kind of sad, yes. Again, tipping point. But they're very fragile. They're made from ceramic, which I did here in a ceramics class. The inside is woven, and it's spun woven paper, which is a Japanese technique called shifu. Very strong and yet very delicate. Inside of each of these leaves is a ginger seed, and ginger is a symbol of hope. This piece was the beginning of our paper making and stitched adventures. I wanted to just try putting things together with the idea of mending the environment. So I started stitching this, and this became the basis or the idea for our collaborative piece, which you will see going up on the wall over here. It's also on the table because I haven't finished installing. But Helen did all of the photographs. Some are printed on bark, some on paper. I'm a paper maker, so we made lots of paper. Lots of little bits of weaving to put in here. But the thing that was really cool about this is how we spent the pandemic. It was just so amazing. We went to my backyard, I had a huge long table, and Helen would be at one end, I'd be at the other, and we'd sew our hearts out.
It was like a quilting bee, yes. It was great.
It was. I mean, it was really healing for us.
Right.
Then we went up to the Morgan Conservatory in Cleveland. If you're not familiar with that, it's an amazing place. They specialize in paper making, bookbinding, and printing. And we did a residency there. We learned how to make the lace paper that you see on the wall over here. This is us kind of putting the threads into the frames, and then these would be dipped in paper pulp. Before we put the photos in.
And then we traveled together and we photographed industry and combined them with the Amazon photographs.
Here's a finished one, but you can see this finished over there, and the idea was we wanted to superimpose the idea of this tree and natural materials against the industry that we were seeing. I also made a lot of these lace papers as well to do some sculptures with them. You'll see the sculptures on the other side of the wall here. And the idea here was I wanted to take the natural bark and now impose industry on it. So here the paper is more regular, and I wanted it to look like factories or something. I call these prefab trees. This is Aurelio, who is the shaman of the Kofan, which is the indigenous tribes that we worked with. You'll see this piece up there. But the shamans there, and I have to just read this because it's important. They believe that the source of life lies in the equilibrium and reciprocity between humans, flora, and fauna. So we want to leave you with that thought. And here are websites. And also the website of the reserve, and as I said, pick up one of these, and you can go to their website and explore a little bit more about it and sign up for a tour. It was amazing.
It changed our life.
Yeah.
Well, the beauty surrounding us changes our life too. And to watch you in your patient way, taking piece by piece and arranging it so beautifully.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wow. Yes.
we'd love to take questions.
Yeah, I'd like to know about the pictures, how you got those. Did you just approach the children?
So I was asked to photograph the children. And so I photographed the children for the reserve. And so the parents were there, and the children, participated. And they loved, we just had visuals to be able to talk because I didn't speak Spanish. And in fact, the indigenous community has their own language, so I didn't speak Spanish, but we would show the pictures, and it was lovely.
They had some meals with us. They were right there. They were really interested in our phones and seeing what we were doing. One gentleman with us had some binoculars, and they were just blown away. And he eventually just gave it to them, gave it to the children so that they could have it. But the interaction was really cool, despite the language barrier. They were interested in us. We were interested in them.
How long were you there?
2 weeks. The end of it, we went to the Galapagos, so we were at the reserve probably 10 days. And we traveled. We were at the reserve, then we traveled deep into the forest and stayed overnight at another place. And so it was pretty cool. Yes?
I know there was a language barrier, but did you get a feel for their thought process on what your mission was, how they felt about what your objective was? And lastly, did they get an opportunity to see this completed beautiful work?
They did not. And they saw the photographs that I took, but they did not see the completed pieces. We talked to Aurelio, who was the shaman, and knew what his voice was, what he cared about, and how he was trying to save his community. So we knew what they were, what the exchange was.
The woman who owns and runs the reserve, too, she has a really good relationship with them, and she speaks Spanish. That's her native language. So she could communicate, and she would really kind of act as a translator, too. I think we've talked about when we go back, maybe we'll bring a PowerPoint of these pieces. I think it'd be really cool to share it with them. But something about Aurelio that really struck me is that, first of all, the indigenous people have the knowledge of the medicines and all the incredible things that the rainforest can provide with us. But as they die out, we're losing that. And he doesn't have a successor. So that's really a scary thing. He has a son, but the son is doing something else. And, Other questions?
Well, I would just like to ask you how you come about so naturally, how this happens. Oh, it's just so amazing.
That's a good question. How does it happen? I don't know. I work all the time, and I have more ideas than I could ever realize, but it develops over time. One thing I didn't say about my work is you see these pod shapes in most of my work, and those, to me, those have developed probably over the last decade, but they're wombs and they're shrouds.
Oh.
And they contain their wombs, new life, and their shrouds. They're celebrating both life and death.
Oh. Now, what piece is that? Are you looking at?
All of them that
All
have
of
these
them.
pod shapes.
Oh.
By the way, this is banana fiber, which is, from the rainforest. And yeah.
Banana fiber.
Yeah, you can spin it and weave it.
Amazing.
Yeah.
The wonderful thing about collaboration is we learn from each other. We really talk things over, put the show up together, and figure things out.
Yeah, even just this morning, we're bouncing ideas off of each other. And what do you think about this? And should we do it this way? And, so it's great.
It's good.
Well, I want to go back to banana fiber. How does this happen?
Well, it's the, if you were to see a banana tree,
Yes?
the bark, the inside of the bark has a very stringy substance, and that's what's used.
Ah,
Yeah. Noreen.
And maybe you'll explain this in your talk tonight, but for those of us who are followers, do you take, like the banana fibers, is it made on, a lot of these are you know, three-dimensional, so, but do you make the weaving a flat piece and then you mold it somehow?
That's a really good question. Most of my work starts on the loom, but I engineer the shape. So I put spacers into while I'm weaving, and I pull those out when it comes off the loom. Then I grab the warp and just pull it, and it kind of just gathers up. And then I refine the shape by the coiling around the outside.
Have you done a video of that? I would love to see it.
I haven't. I did some stills. In fact, Helen did all the photos. She photographed my whole process, and I posted that. But I need to do a video because it is interesting. The thing is, it takes a really long time. So who wants to watch a video for 5 hours of me weaving and tying knots?
Norwegians. Well, I mean, and so do you have more than one loom? Because you have numbers of different
I
kinds.
do. I actually have quite a few looms. I've got about 4 in my studio. I have one farmed out at my daughter's house. I have a friend who has about 5 looms. I used to teach weaving here, and I left a lot of my looms here.
So you might have different medium on these different looms
I
so
do.
that you can work on the different
I
parts
do.
of an exhibit at the same time.
And typically I work on about 6, 7 sculptures at one time.
Wow, great, thank you.
All those hanging pieces on the other side of this wall, did you weave all those?
Yes. Actually, that's not weaving, it's knitting.
Oh, that's what I thought.
Yeah, it's knitted, and I had to go back to YouTube and watch a video to remember how to knit because I haven't done it in so long. So that's
Now
knitted.
show us what you mean, what you're referring to here.
The ones that are hanging.
The
on
ones that are hanging.
Oh,
And
oh,
then the round shape, and in fact, the sculpture's behind you.
Right there.
That's pozo. That's a fiber used in paper making. And instead of beating it to pulp, you take the leaf and you just gently pull it apart, and it makes this lace. And then you lay that over something and let it dry, and it takes that form. It's very strong. And Helen and I learned that at a workshop we took up at the Morgan.
Right.
And we've been using it ever since. You'll see it in these stitch pieces too. We did some,
And in my encaustic, yeah.
and yeah, exactly.
oh.
So we're kind of in love with
I
it.
thought that was knitting. I thought that
Yeah,
can't
you're
be.
right. And the edges is called coiling, which is a basketry technique. But yeah, you're right, it's knitted.
And where do you learn this way of doing these things?
The technique, you learn workshops from other artists. I have a degree in fibers.
A degree in fibers.
Yeah.
Wow.
I majored in fibers. The ideas, I don't know, I've always developed things.
For me, I learn by making mistakes. Many mistakes, and then I learn.
That's a good point. And
That's wonderful. Don't we all, huh?
Yeah.
we learn from students too, I have to say that.
Yes.
I was talking to you earlier that once an educator, always an educator. We want to educate about the rainforest, but we learn from each other, we learn from students. I haven't taught nearly as much as Helen has, but that's another source, looking at other artists.
Yeah. Wonderful.
Since we're on technique, Helen, could you talk about the encaustic, which I know is over here. Is there encaustic on these too?
There's encaustic on the back, tree bones, yes.
What's that? What is that, and how do you do it?
Yeah,
So
good question. What is the encaustic?
encaustic is wax. So I'm a beekeeper, and the wax from the bees is mixed with resin and painted while it's hot onto the surface of a photograph that's been glued to a board. And then I actually just take a heat gun and smooth it all out and embed things into it.
Whatever made you do that?
Well, so photographs are so two-dimensional, and I wanted it to be things to be three-dimensional. And that's why it's so great to work with Char, is because she's three-dimensional in all sorts of ways. But you know,
quite know how to take that
no,
one.
our relationship is three-dimensional. I don't know. Anyway, so I just wanted it to be three-dimensional.
And so we get to experience that, going from that two-dimensional to three-dimensional. It's just magnificent.
I'm just in awe of the patience you two have to do all these things. I just was looking at those leaves earlier, and I was trying to count them, and I gave up, and I thought, who has the patience?
Well, here's something you don't know. Helen just put a whole portfolio of leaves back in her car that she didn't use.
Oh, amazing.
COVID helps. I mean, you entertain yourself with COVID during COVID.
She was stealing leaves from all over Clintonville.
Did everybody hear that? No, not everybody.
If you think about those leaves, they had to come from someplace, and she sort of surreptitiously was taking leaves from neighbors and friends' houses. So a lot of us realized how many she was making.
Is that why my hosta has holes in it?
Mine are gone. Char, I do have a question for you. The structure of a lot of these is just a natural limb. Are they from the Amazon, or are these just local?
They're local because we couldn't really bring anything back with us. I would have liked to. I did sneak one seed pod back.
Yeah.
But shh. It was interesting. We actually talked about
We
it.
did.
Could we bring stuff? But we figured we really couldn't. So those are local. Most of the twigs and branches that you see are from a park that I live by. So, you know, I find things, I think it looks interesting, and drag it home.
I was wondering if in the past or currently if you've thought about doing the similar work but more locally. Not saying that in the Amazon and in the other countries they don't also need more recognition for the struggles that they're going through within their environment, but we also have the same issues within our own country and our own Indigenous and First Nation and Native Americans and their lands also being affected by oil, as well as old growth trees being affected as well. Because being more at home, some people, they see things going on in another country, and as we are one world, it seems a little far away for people to be able to interact or be able to do something. Whereas when it's a little bit more locally, you can connect a little bit and have a little bit more involvement than you can when it's so far away.
Well, I'll talk a little bit about that because actually most of my work addresses local environmental issues. I do travel the country a lot and talk about things. I mean, I grew up in San Diego, so I've got a lot of work that addresses the environment there. But I address the hardwood forest here a lot. I do address native cultures in the knowledge that they have, mostly medicinal. I'm really interested in medicinal plants and the knowledge that we get from plants. So I would say the largest body of my work addresses just that. What I brought here was because we wanted to address the Amazon. But I think about that all the time. There's so much work to be done here, but we kind of have to do it everywhere.
And we're talking about that because we have an exhibition in a year at Marietta, so we're going to go to Marietta and look at the area and make site-specific work for that.
Yeah, and Well, we traveled to Sedona together, and body of work that addresses what's there and what's being lost there. We went to the Pacific Northwest, and Helen photographed the forest.
The forest.
And I did a lot of work addressing what's happening there. And you can see that stuff on my website or Instagram.
Have you been with working more, doing work that's involved locally, have you thought about or also collaborated with those native artists? So that way the work that you're trying to also bring light to is also connected within that community?
Wait, I couldn't quite hear what you were saying.
Okay,
Let's try that again.
When you do work that is a little bit more local and or within the country, have you done or have thought about also working with the community and native artists so that way the work is also connected to the community and brings it a little bit more together rather than just your interpretation or how you see it coming to light, but more connected with the communities themselves?
I think about that all the time. Have I done it? No. Something, though, that's coming up, I'm actually curating a show here called The Earth Is Us, and then we're trying to really bring in all different viewpoints about the environment. So that's where my focus has been right now. But I would dearly love to work with, some community people. But I think about it, but I haven't done it.
And when we were at the Reserve for Peace, we did work with Mariana. And it's not that she contributed to the art, but we heard her perspective, and so we had conversations about that perspective.
And one of the things we hope to do when we go back is really work with the indigenous women there and trade ideas for crafts and skills. Whether that will come about, we don't know, but it's kind of our hope.
We struggle with so much of beginnings, like saying paper bags to put our groceries into rather than the plastic bags, and thinking of all that plastic in the ocean that is strangling our whales. I mean, we are so far from even beginning to understand all that you're calling us to. I was noticing in the Dispatch today, there's a community in Colorado that are taking weapons, guns, and turning them into garden tools. It's just like, thank you for drawing me to a consciousness of that. So, we have a lot to learn, don't we, huh? In the light of what you were asking, huh? How do we come together with this? And I know it's hard. Plastic bottles, of water, what are we going to put them in? Help us. Help us understand the alternatives. Art's one way.
Yeah.
What is your next plan with your artwork and displaying and communicating? Where do you hope to take it in the near future?
Well, as a collaborative, we have a show coming up at Marietta College. I personally am working on a body of work addressing fungi, mycorrhizal network, because I'm so interested in trees. And, I put proposals out different places where they're going. I'm doing a lot of curating, a lot of talking. Lori mentioned I've got another talk tonight. But that's where I am. We can talk about where you are.
And I'm just making work. And it is about the environment. I've learned a lot from this show. I just retired, so I'm figuring things out. And just that's where I want to put my energy.
Thank you.
I just want to say thank you.
I mean, this work is so extraordinary, and you both just are so extraordinary with what you've done and what you've brought us. And I just can't say enough about the work. I mean, I've been coming down here for 27 years, and I know, Char, you did all the weaving, but this is phenomenal. Just unbelievable. It just touches my heart.
Thank you.
In fact, these look like hearts to me. I mean, you are just beacons of light. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Really kind of you.
How did you two come to collaborate together in the first place?
We know each other from school. I once took a class with Char many, many, many years ago. I think we both really respect each other, and we started to travel together to Italy. So I taught a class, and Char had a residency, and so because of that, we got to know each other really well.
Yeah, and I think the collaborative work came about because we started exchanging ideas after the trip to Ecuador, and we wanted to really express what we felt about it. And as I said, it's mainly educational, but we also both sit on the board of an organization that supports the Amazon Reserve for Peace. And neither one of us is are fundraisers. We're not, we're not bankers, we're not realtors, and we thought, what can we do to help? And our artwork was the natural outcome. And so we decided we could do it together. And I think we started separately and then just kind of just happened. As I said, the pandemic really helped us. I know that sounds funny to say, but from an artist's point of view, it's time to work. We were a little hesitant to get together for a while. In fact, we met in parks and hiked. And then we figured out, well, I have a big backyard. We can be safe there. And so it happened.
I think a lot of us turned to nature and parks during the pandemic, for sure. Absolutely. Not on. Sorry. I was just saying, I think a lot of us turned to parks, during the pandemic for inspiration and solace. So I understand how that
Thank you.
probably influenced your work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Once upon a time, you were a beekeeper.
I still am a beekeeper.
Ooh, wonderful.
I don't take honey from my bees. I leave the honey to the bees, though.
Oh, well, tell us more about that. That's an art in itself.
I've been a beekeeper for probably 10 years and have 2 hives. Sometimes the hives survive, sometimes they don't. It's a gift to my community.
Yes. Oh, wonderful.
And it's fascinating as an artist to see little bee artists.
Delightful. Well, how about we walk with you to be standing among that amazing experience behind you.
Okay.
Let's do that. Let's come and you can tell us more about this. I know you started to, but what happens here?
So these are the weaver bird nests, and
Come on in. Let's be in here.
this is knitting. But in all my work, what takes the most time is the coiling. That's such a slow process. And I get a little bit crazy. I knew I had to hang these from a cord, and I didn't have any, so I made cords. And that took a long time. So, I'm a little bit crazy when it comes to this stuff. But as I said, I work all the time. I'm not a person that can sit still. When I'm sitting, I have to be doing something with my hands. Whenever I'm traveling, my husband drives, I work.
branches are
The branches
beautiful.
are branches I just found. Actually, my grandson brought me a couple. He said, "Here, you can make some art out of these," and I did.
Beautiful.
I'd kind of like to talk a little bit about these weavings on
Yes.
this wall, because, again, this was kind of just a fun thing I wanted to do, but I wanted to find wefts that were just laying around my house or my yard. So the basic weaving is just linen, but there's some interesting things on here. What I did, this is horsehair and pine needles, Spanish moss, blue jeans. This is soy fiber. You can make fiber out of soy. Just so there are all kinds of things that I just picked up and found and wanted to put together into a weaving. So,
How do you make fiber out of soy?
you know, I bought it. I've never done it,
Oh,
but it's kind of the same thing. From the stems of the plant, there's fibrous material that can be spun.
oh,
Yeah. And that's kind of what I'm talking about here is we have so many resources available to us, you know, in the yard or in your house. These are threads pulled off of old blue jeans. You know, this is just foxtails that were growing in my yard. That one in the corner are fern stems pulled out of my yard. So I'm with Helen. I go and raid gardens of other people, and people bring me dead things. It all goes into the yard.
that's wonderful.
Yes.
I wasn't here. I'm so sorry to repeat it. What the material of this?
This is kozo. Okay, and it is a material that is used in paper making. Typically, you would beat it to pulp and make a sheet of paper. But once you cook the leaf, you can take it and very delicately pull it apart, and it makes this lacy form.
Put it in the what? Water or something?
Yeah, you cook it.
Cook it.
Yes, you have to cook it to make it soft.
What is the basic material of this one? Is it a powder or is it what?
It is a plant.
Plant.
Yeah, it's a plant. Yeah.
It is the leaf.
It's from the mulberry tree.
Yeah, it's
tree.
related to the mulberry. Yeah. And it's used in paper making, as I said. It makes a very strong, good piece of paper. But I would actually invite you to carefully touch these because it's incredibly strong.
We can touch it?
Yeah, go ahead, touch it. You know, you think it's just going to fall apart, but it's really strong.
Is it bad to ask, rude to ask you where you find the base material of this?
I actually, because it doesn't grow here, I have to order it from paper mills. So, you know, there's a place in Indiana called Twin Rocker, and there's a place in New York called Carriage House Papers, and I buy it from them. So I get these like 2 pounds of it. It's dried leaves, basically. I take those leaves, I boil it for 2 to 3 hours with soda ash to make it soft, and get rid of any acids in it, and then I can form it.
I came a bit in your interview. I'm so sorry. That is why I didn't ask any question, but I congratulations. So
Thank you.
The idea, I like the idea.
Thank you. And Helen has worked a lot with the kozo.
Right.
Want to say anything about it?
It's just really fun to work with. So it can take on any shape that you drape it on.
Then it could be on the surface to use it. Not
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what of these pieces here?
Okay, that's the paper, the lace paper that we were making up at the conservatory. And it's the same as the framed pieces with Helen's photographs behind them. But I wanted to do 3D work because that's what I do. And so, I use tree bark. You know, I use tree bark extensively in my work and try to recreate trees in different ways. So I thought it would be interesting to use this lace paper in contrast with the bark because this is so formal and industrial looking. I thought that's a great contrast. And the idea was just that I'm contrasting that industry with the bark, which is the opposite of the way we did in our collaborative framework. We wanted the industry behind and the natural material on top.
Yes.
So,
just beautiful. It's causes us to be appreciating.
Well, that's the idea.
Yes, you are doing it. Let's go look at the leaves along the wall.
So this is the Encaustic, and I combined the industry that I photographed with the children, and just because the children are impacted by what the pollution is doing.
And you've seen their faces.
Right,
How beautiful.
right.
And the leaves around us. Tell us how you do these.
Oh, this is chlorophyll printing. So I photographed industry, and I transferred it to transparency, positive transparencies. And
Now, what does that mean?
So a transparency is a sheet of transparent material.
Oh.
And then I put it under glass, and I exposed it to the sun for a day or 2 days or 3 days. And then the sun faded the leaf, and I have the image.
So the transparency was like a negative.
The transparency was a positive, but yes.
Ah. And these are the leaves you searched out to find.
And this is mainly hosta leaves. And
Yeah.
the children here are laser printed on leaves. So I used a laser printer to print those. And this is the Coca-Cola Dam. This was put up by the Chinese. So Ecuador hired the Chinese to put up a dam, and they paid them in oil. So the sad thing is the Coca-Cola Dam was so shoddily made. There's so many cracks in it, and it doesn't work. It's a hydroelectric dam. It doesn't work very well. But Ecuador has to pay billions of dollars in oil to pay back the Chinese. So those are photographs from the Coca-Cola Dam.
In the spirit of my grandfather, Jerry O'Shaughnessy, to get after him.
Yeah.
O'Shaughnessy Dam.
Right. It just truly breaks your heart. First of all,
Yeah.
it's in the middle of volcanoes. So if a volcano would erupt, it truly would destroy
Aw.
everything.
Oh.
And then the second part is the reserve is starting to erode, the reserve that we went because of this dam.
It's so amazing how you have had the children's faces come out of the beauty of nature there around them. Oh,
And
wow.
they're looking at us, right?
Yes, they are. Yes. They're saying, are you going to be with us and help us?
Sure.
Yes, because Helen and Char are with us, huh? And we thank you. That was wonderful.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Yes.